How's it going, Isabel?
I'm good. I'm well, thanks. Happy 4th of July, the
Fourth
Independence
of July.
Day.
Yeah, for the podcast listeners, I guess in reference, this is the Fourth of July in the USA because I'm assuming listeners are also abroad, and so that's Independence Day here in 2018.
Yes, 2018. And it's funny you say abroad because I noticed there's someone following us from Sweden. So, hey,
Oh,
Sweden,
really? Hey, all right. How cool.
really awesome.
Yeah. And I know that our stats are really like we're more and more listeners, so we're getting out there.
Yeah, and also I wanted to do a shout out the last episode we did, which was on purpose. I used
Huh?
was it the last one that I used the image of a hawk?
Hawk
Not this one.
that's right.
I use an image from Matt Feeney, and I said I would mention him. So
Cool.
yeah,
Is that the person that was being messaged in our Instagram inbox?
he was super awesome about it.
Yeah, totally.
Actually, I think it's the picture of the void. I'm pretty sure it's the void picture,
Oh, really? Okay. Okay.
which is one of my favorite picture.
Ah,
So image. So yeah. So he was super nice. So thank you so much for like
yeah, totally. Thank you for that, Matt
pictures.
Feeney, right?
Yeah.
Cool.
Feeney.
Yeah, I saw the little dialogue and I thought it was just really, really kind. What a kind person. So thanks, Matt.
Great guy.
Yeah,
So
awesome.
Vin, what's the word of the day?
Yeah, well, going from kind to is it going to be kind when we talk about spiritual elitism?
I had to laugh when you picked that. I was trying to say the word elitism, and it's really hard for me.
Oh, because you're French Canadian. How is that? That word doesn't roll off your tongue, maybe, or what?
No, it doesn't work. No, I want to say
Okay,
light. So that's how I want to pronounce it.
a light. Oh, yeah. Okay. I guess we can say whatever we want, really, especially when we're talking about this word.
Seriously.
So it's fairly funny because to our listeners, like spiritual elitism is our word of the week, and that well, I think we can go really anywhere with this one. And it's awesome because I think in the spiritual community, there's such a taboo. Like in the spiritual community in America, means you have to be a liberal, which means you have to be anti-guns. And Isabel, what are you going to do after this recording of this podcast?
I'm gonna go shoot guns with
Hell yeah!
I know, and I know I'll be judged for it, but I don't really care. I really enjoy it. It's so much fun because I'm really good at it, and I just love the target. So
Oh man. Well, it's like it's again like Isabel's husband is an Army National Guard recruiter,
yes,
and was in the Navy for 20 years, and I went to SEAL training. I did military police for 3 years. Like, so I can't say that I'm a gun carrier, but I've recently been like, man, I really want to go shoot again. There's just something in the way that feels, and it's very similar to having my Harley Davidson, an old Harley Davidson, which also some spiritual people are like, why do you have a Harley Davidson? Why do you wear leather chaps and a leather coat and like blah blah blah?
so
But
true.
the feeling of shooting guns is very similar to the feeling of riding a Harley. I say Harley in specific because of the rumble.
It's like that sense of like freedom and power, and yeah,
Hmm.
it is being in control of something like that. Like because it's the same, I'm sure, with your motorcycle. You feel the power of holding
Mm.
the motorcycle. Same with the gun. Yeah.
Even when I start to bike up right outside my patio, which in my home is, like most homes, pretty much ground level, and my Harley is sitting right outside on the grass outside my patio. So when I start it up because it's an older one, so it's got to idle for a couple minutes before it's ready to ride without shutting off while I'm riding. And just the rumble shakes the floor in the house when I'm inside the house getting ready to get on the bike. So it feels like this on my feet. So like my whole body is getting the vibration from the motorcycle warming up.
I'm
And
glad.
there is really something lower chakra activating about that.
Yeah.
And I would say, knowing what I do about chakras and energy and Kundalini and Tantra, that having those chakras really like really activated and given due credence, like through energy, like that activates the rest of the system. And so if all the chakras are open, which mine are, then my crown feels joyous, like childlike joy from the experience of the rumble of fireworks, the rumble of thunder, the rumble of an earthquake, the rumble of the Harley, the feeling of guns being shot when I'm holding them. It's a little daunting, I think, when I hear guns being shot.
It is.
And it's at me.
Yeah. And you know, it's interesting you say that, because for me, it's like I've always been terrified of guns. And to actually be able to do this is like such a win. And it's also like, it helps me, you know, they say you always fear what you don't understand.
That's it right there.
Yeah. So for me to get over that fear, I still fear the small like pistols that my husband have. Like I'm not really good with these one. I like the big guns. Like I like the one that you put on the table, or that you feel stable with it.
Yeah.
Anyway, but it's all about that fear, because I like I've never handled guns before coming to the U.S. So yeah. Other than that,
could we say then that spiritual elitism is everything that you just said, Isabel, which is being afraid of the things that we don't understand? And so we create this reality. You gotta be vegan. You gotta not shoot guns. You gotta believe in spirituality. You gotta wear like your chakra colors on your shirts. You gotta have the flower of life, bro. Like, don't.
You're a corporation. You can't, like,
you gotta be against stuff. Wait a minute. What? You gotta be against stuff. I don't get it. Like, isn't oneness being for everything?
Yeah, I feel like it, because it's so like it's the message of love, and it should be like no matter what, right? Unconditional love should be the spiritual elitism.
Yeah. Oh man, you could name 1,000 words in French that I would never be able to pronounce. So good for you for trying, man.
But yeah, like for me, like there's no such thing as, and it's for everything, right? Like I remember like the first time I met you, I was like, oh, Wynn has a face tattoo. And it goes straight into judgment and into like a place of like, because it's unusual, because it's not something I see every day. But the same thing, like it shouldn't be, we shouldn't judge the things that we don't know, or that we're not used to see, or that we don't fully understand the intention, or not fully, like I don't know, like I just feel like you're right. Like in this social community, like the other day, oh my goodness, I'm on the Eckhart Tolle Facebook page, like the community.
Which was, we talked about him the last episode.
No, we did, yeah. And I'm on the community page because there's good stuff. And I recently found out that I was very much connected to what he called energy frequency holder. So I wanted to learn more about it, and I found this community. So we started talking, and I look at, someone said something to the fact, like, if you're talking from your ego right now, like you have understood nothing, and you don't understand that there's an illusion. Anyway, he went over and over about the illusion and how like everything is an illusion, and I could sense his frustration. And I thought, this is so funny, but because he's emotionally like frustrated, which is his ego, and he's getting like totally annoyed by people, which in my head I'm like, that's your ego, because if you were fully in the illusion, you would realize that whatever people say, you don't give a shit.
Wait, are you talking Eckhart Tolle was doing that, or somebody who commented?
No, it was somebody who was commenting.
Yeah.
Because so that community is like people like you and I that just ask question, and Eckhart Tolle doesn't ever interact. I've never seen him answer. No. But it's all a group that have read his book and all that. Yeah. And the post was someone asking about, when is the ego a positive thing? Like, is there any positive aspect to the ego? So this guy was just commenting on and on, like, if you think the ego is a good thing, like, you have understood nothing about the illusion. And I thought, This is interesting because we're on earth for the human experience, and you've heard me say that over and over and over again, and I
Mm-hmm.
do believe that the ego is positive. And that's one thing that in the spiritual community I've noticed is that, oh, you should never have your ego, or your ego
Mm-hmm.
is a bad thing. Like, I
Mm-hmm.
don't know if you experienced that, but I feel like it goes well with the theme of today, which I can't pronounce. But
Spiritual elitism.
by the end of this podcast, I'll say it correctly.
Ah.
But I feel
Well,
like,
you know, Isabel, you're not a real American if you can't say elitism.
seriously, that's okay because I'm not American yet. So
Yeah, I know, I know. You're never gonna gain entry. By the time you die, you might be an American.
that's it. Oh, that's funny. But all that to say that I feel like sometimes there's those perception that, it's just like it's too rigid, man. Like you
Yeah.
have to like be flexible here. And I think if you get rigid about something, it tells something about you. It should shed light about yourself.
So I wrote my book, Follies of an Awakening Fool, in 2013.
Okay.
And there is a lot of that dialogue, this dialogue, in that book. What's funny is when I go back and I read it, there's a lot of stuff that I was being exactly what I was calling out. I was being exactly what I would call a spiritual elitist, and I was for quite some time after that. So my journey was really to do just what you just said, like to look at myself. So basically, my book, I knew what my book was. It was a way of setting up what I had been through and what I was about to go through to comprehend. And even had some people who read it who, like, I decided to not finish it. I got maybe 3/4 of the way in because I knew it wasn't a finished book. It was fucking amazing, but it wasn't a finished book. There's more to come, and you were uncovering that. So I did. I set myself up both as, here's how we're doing it all wrong, and here's how we're supposed to do it right. Meanwhile, making myself exactly what I was calling out, which is really genius because when you think about it, by doing what I did, I set an intention for my flow. Then, I recapped my life that brought me into an awakening and all the things that the awakening brought me, and then where I was with it at that point, which was maybe at that point a couple of years into knowing that I was in an awakening. I mean, I think the awakening probably started years prior, but now it was a couple of years into, obviously, like, this is what's going on. So I was, and I played out the role of, I had one teacher in film school in Los Angeles a couple of years ago who was a Vedic meditation teacher, and she said she went through 3 years of Vedic spiritual bullying. And the truth was, she still was. She was still a spiritual bully. and our egos clashed on that. And I think because we were both trained to not be a spiritual bully, and we didn't know how to not be that anymore. And I had just come out of and I had just come out of Asia, all this like very meditative journey for quite some time, and I was in film school where it's very strict, structured, dogmatic, and yet artistic. It's like such a mind fuck, really. But then there was this extra value of, like, what am I trying to do in film based off of all the things that I've accomplished or experienced or whatever, and how do I share it through film? And going, man, I'm still dogmatic. I'm still a bully. I'm still calling people out for all the things that I know they shouldn't be doing, meanwhile making me the exact same because I'm calling them out for the things that they shouldn't be doing because I'm not accepting that it's just part of the experience.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, I see what you're saying now. And that's what you would call the spiritual bully, like in the sense of.
Yeah. And I've been real cognizant on our episodes, even today and previous to today, of when I call things out, to go, wait a minute, like, I want to make sure that I'm not being a bully. I want to make sure that I'm not being an elitist because because I'm calling out things that inherently go with the spiritual journey, as we call the spiritual journey. Kind of going like, hey, everything we've ever been taught in the world isn't really matching up to what we feel inside as our truth. And yet, the structure of the world has created it so that our mind still attaches to a certain way of doing. Like Christianity and Islam, fundamentalist, in Judaism, and all these systems have kind of set the stage for us to be, mine is better than yours. And in spirituality, we're doing the same thing. Ours is better than all these others.
Right.
Well, wait.
That's interesting because yesterday you posted something about your fire being better than others.
Right. I did it on purpose because this is what I've gotten to, Isabel and listeners. I've gotten to the point where I fucking laugh at myself. I'm like, I'm gonna put this out there because it's gonna fucking crack me up. I don't know what kind of reaction people will have. I'll be called out on it. If people call me out on it, I'm gonna laugh. I'm gonna be like, you got me. But really, who's the joke on? Because I knew what I was doing.
Yeah. Right. Funny. It just came to mind when you said better than yours. Yeah, that's too funny. It's interesting because you're right. Like, it's like there's always one thing better than the other, and you see that a lot in like the mainstream spiritual aspect. Like,
yeah,
like we talk a lot about Eckhart Tolle, but there's other people like that have a approach to it, and I don't get that much from Wayne Dyer, like
right.
Dyer. I didn't get that much from him or Louise. I feel like they have like quite an open mind, but it's interesting.
Wait. After Wayne Dyer, you said, what was the name?
Louise Hay.
Oh yeah, right.
Yeah,
they're friends. They're both passed away now, so they were friends.
Yeah, but I never got that from them. But lately, and that's a reflection of me. Lately, Doreen Virtue.
Yeah. Oh God. He was my first entry into angels and stuff like that, and I was reading it, going, "Wow, there's value here." And what a fucking bitch.
Really? Oh, that's funny. It's funny because lately she's really into Jesus. Like, she's very much around the Bible and bringing in a lot. And actually, I think her live videos are all related to the Bible. And I'm having such a struggle with it. Like, I can't. I'm not even attracted to her live feed anymore because of that. And I don't know if I know is because of the connection to the Bible and Christianity, but I like to believe that I know that she have a card deck of Jesus, which I actually bought, and it's more like the spiritual Jesus, like not the Jesus that we know from the Bible, but yeah. So anyway, just to say, like, I struggle with that piece, which kind of align a little bit to that, like being like focused on one religion more than another.
I'm glad you bring all these names up because these are the things that I would love to talk about that set, I think, a poor example of how to find oneness within ourselves. Yeah. And I think it's a generational thing. And I feel like those people that we're talking about are either passed away at this point, like Wayne Dyer, Louise Hay, or going to be soon. And, that generation that they served is also the Osho generation. Yeah. It's also, even Eckhart Tolle, it's also the Dalai Lama generation, who the Dalai Lama, fucking China was telling him, we'll tell you if you can reincarnate or not, because that's our choice. And he's like, because he said, I don't think I'm going to reincarnate. I think the world has gotten all that it needed from the Dalai Lamas. So I think the Dalai Lama has a great awareness of everything is shifting. Meanwhile, but here's these other ones who are like so strict and structured, but that was the time frame that they were in. And these are the ones that we're following. We're trying to say, let's keep using what the models that they had. Well, the models that they had were inherently anti-system because that's what the time called for. But we're not in that time frame anymore. And I think that is something maybe that's a little more key in the point of spiritual elitism. Like, all the structures are dissolving. Yeah. We shouldn't be looking to these people as a solid teacher. We should be looking at them as a gateway to where we are now. And I was going to name another one of that generation who's still alive. And I mean, please know that when I say stuff like I do, like it can all turn around on me, and I love it. It cracks me up. So Ram Dass, I think, is the biggest fucking asshole in the world.
I don't know who that is.
Ram Dass was a Harvard professor who went and found, I think, Babaji as his Indian teacher, and he also used a lot of acid and a lot of other stuff. And he's written a very popular book in the spiritual world. And you know, I followed him on Facebook a couple of years ago. He's got millions of followers, you know. And he wrote, as soon as I followed him, within a week, I had been resisting him for like 4 years. I'm like, okay, I'm going to open myself up to him because people keep talking about him. I'm missing something. The very first post that he personally puts up on his Facebook is, there will only be a certain amount of people that could ever reach enlightenment in this world, and only like a very small percentage. I mean, he really limited it down to he was among an elite few. Wow. And I was the first one to comment on his thing. I said, you're a fucking ass. I said, are you seriously going to say that you are so good and that the rest of the world should be as lucky as you to find enlightenment, when the truth is enlightenment is our natural state? It seems to me an enlightenment teacher like yourself should know a little bit better. Shame on you.
Yeah.
And that I needed to do that. That was for that was for me. It cracked open something new in me to start breaking out of that myself, because I was stuck in it too. I recognized the mirror that he was presenting inside of me. Yeah. And it was helpful for me to like speak out, because it gave me the opportunity to look at myself and go, I'm doing the same. Right. That only a few people could ever be as awakened as I have reached at this point. So I was doing the same thing. And so it was awesome. Like, it really served its purpose for me. And then a guy right behind me posted, and he's like, he was a little more kind, but he said, it's a numbers game, really. We have 8 billion people in the world. To think that only a small fraction of 8 billion people could reach enlightenment is a little obtuse, you know? Yeah. But yeah, I don't know what's going on with that generation, but they needed to be like they were, but we're in a different generation. I mean,
we are. and it's almost like, I've noticed that with America a lot, and it's like there's extremes, and you have the elite extreme on one side, and then right now it's like everyone is spiritual, and I went to, like, I can't remember what store it was like a Gap store. Yeah. There, and they have like spiritual crystals everywhere.
Yeah, right.
Weird at Gap, like, how can that thing be spiritual? Like, do you know what I mean? It's like, right. Everyone is connected to crystals and is connected to like that more hippie, like free,
bohemian, all of it. Yeah.
It's really funny to see like both extremes. It's like, whoa, wait, like, listen to your truth here.
Yeah, and see what I remember. Allison, my twin flame wife, who lives in Seattle, and again, I'm in North Carolina, and she went to Bed Bath & Beyond and saw the flower of life on candles there, and she had the same reaction you do. Yeah. It was a good sign for me to hear that and go, wait, but that's cool. That means it's just becoming more common. It's like it's everywhere. Yeah. Coldplay, as big as Coldplay is musician-wise in the world, their most recent album cover a couple years ago has the flower of life on it.
So true. Yeah. But it is cool. It's awesome. But yet.
But people are assuming because they wear the flower of life that suddenly they're enlightened.
They get connected to their own like divine self, and it's like, well, you need to work a little bit harder, dude. Like, it's interesting. And well, it's like,
in a way,
I'm spiritual.
I know, but even we sound elitist, which is funny. I mean, the joke is so big that even when we talk about it, we're automatically like marginalizing ourselves. And I mean, I really want that known to the listeners, that even us communicating about this it could be really kind of borderline. Where, you know, and I'm happy to own that,
because we're being upfront. and that's the idea of the podcast, is like, okay, let's explore this, let's be truthful, let's really like no filters,
Right.
and then go from there. And I
Hell
totally
yeah.
like, me saying this sounds like obnoxious almost, of like, you know, everyone have access to it, but they can't, like, they're not that, like, but what I'm trying to say is, whatever you do, it's, we can't just seek on the external world, and that's what I like, the physical world, the external, like we have an inner connection with ourselves, like a spiritual connection that happens there. And whether it looks like, I don't know, like having tattoos, or whether it looks like wearing certain clothes or having candles all over your place, like it doesn't matter what it is, as long as it speaks to you.
Right.
And
we talked about this part of it last on purpose, the purpose episode.
Yeah, exactly, it all lines up, right?
Right.
That's so true. But you're right, like it is, we are, well, I am criticizing, absolutely, I'm you, right?
Right. So going back to what you were saying, that person who commented on Eckhart Tolle's thing, you're right, I've also experienced that dialogue both from me. I've virtually said the same things that person was saying, and then around me. And it's funny because we don't even know what we could actually call the ego. I mean, Freud identifies the ego as the self, right?
Yeah.
And, you know, the ego, when we talk about ego, that's also a very ambiguous term. What does it mean when we talk about ego, you know? And I think maybe whether we could actually come up with a definition of ego on this podcast any better than anybody's done before us or not, I don't know. But I would say that I think part of what we define ego as is what gives us the human experience, which allows us to communicate about all these things that we're talking about, both from our perspective and the perspective of anybody else, any other breathing human.
Right. Yeah.
So it allows us this ability to be in this realm and experience these things. So in a way, when I kind of object to Zen and Buddhism when it talks about ego in a way that's like so rigid that you're like that you're a shameful human being for having an egoic life.
Yeah.
And Eckhart Tolle, I picked on him heavily the last episode, but I'll say to his benefit, when he says it's okay to be with ego, it's helpful if you recognize that what you're experiencing right now is from ego. So if you want $1 million, that's your ego saying, I want $1 million. And he's like, if you see a pretty girl run by and you're watching her run by and going, wow, she's really beautiful or whatever, recognize that part of that is your ego, at least when it comes to saying, I want that girl, you know? Like, it's not that you can't, and this is where I think Eckhart Tolle does a great job, is saying it's not that you aren't supposed to operate from these things. It's just recognizing them and really recognizing what's going on in your system helps you slow everything down, so you're not like chasing things that aren't what yours to chase. And yet, by chasing things that seemingly aren't yours to chase, you're still having a fun human experience. We really have to go back and forth on this, like playing devil's advocate back and forth with ourselves, because that is like everything is perfect already, including spiritual elitism. It's part of the journey. It's part of the experience. If it weren't, we wouldn't be able to do it.
That's it. Exactly. And I agree with you. The ego, for me, I see it as such a great tool. Like it's something that we have that allow us to shed light on the shadow, or on different aspects of ourselves that needs maybe a little bit more attention, or in the sense of observing, in the sense of learning our lesson. And like, for me, like, fear is directly linked to the ego. That's how I describe the ego is most intense time is fear. And fear is such a useful emotion because it tells you so much about like yourself and about
Mm-hmm.
like, what needs to heal, or however you want to call it,
Mm-hmm.
what
Mm-hmm.
needs to come to light, basically.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what if we just switch? This is what I know my role is when I'm acting intentionally in the capacity of teacher, which I'm not really doing right now. When I'm acting intentionally in the role of teacher, which I will be soon. I don't know what that means soon, but it will happen. Then my role is to take shamanism, to take mysticism, to take healing, to take Reiki, all of it
Yeah.
to the next level, to the evolutionary level. Like the way that those things have been up until this point in time have been of service for the experience that the world was supposed to have. But now the world is supposed to have an unlimited experience of being a true creator, as Allison's book, the era of the true creator. The point now is to take all these things, kind of break them open, dissolve what doesn't serve anymore, and use the beauty of all the experiences to help us create a brand new canvas, to paint a new canvas in the human experience.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
so all of it has been of service. You know, and that's why it's a generational thing, because now why you have younger people who are more open to what they came in to bring to the world. You know, like it's just more and more and more that's going to keep happening over the next few generations. And our generation now, just like the people who are alive now who are 60, 70 years old, I mean, they didn't have cell phones, they didn't have internet, they didn't have Facebook, they didn't have MySpace,
Oh.
they didn't have computers really, all these things. So they've literally seen the world go from just after a Great Depression into all this, where you had to, at the time, you had to hold together and just like hold down, like because everybody was starving and things like that. And now everything is open, everybody can access anything. If you can't, it's because you have a story in your head that says you can't.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
But now everything is open and exposed. And now we're just like adjusting to that and learning how to work with everything is here, everything's possible. We have all the colors available to us.
Yeah. And it goes back to what I was saying earlier. It's like we went from an extreme to the other. It's like,
Yeah.
it's real how like we shifted from that extreme. Like I remember younger, like we still
Yeah.
had, like I remember actually my mom and I talked about that not too long ago. I remember having a conversation with my mom saying, Mom, like, do you think one day we'll be able to talk on the phone and see each other? Because they used to have
Mm-hmm.
this big Vista phone. I don't know if you know what I mean by that, but there was like a little screen, and
Mm-hmm.
that was the original phone basically that had the number ID.
Okay.
And I remember saying to my mom, like, hey, do you think it's ever gonna have a screen on?
Mm.
And that's not that long ago. Like
Mm.
when you think about it. So we went from
Yeah.
extreme of very conservative in the sense of like we stayed with our little community. We didn't know much about the world. We didn't travel as much either, like flying around.
Yeah.
And into like the like everything is access. We can see anywhere in the world from Google Earth. Like, do you know
Right.
what I mean? Like it's just
Right.
so much an extreme.
Yeah. And now we have drones that can look in on everybody's like into their house and watch them masturbate or, pick their nose or take a shit, like there's no reason to freak out about these things though, because that's the old awakening. That's the generation before us. That's
That fear.
another one of my favorite teachers to pick on is Marianne Williamson. She's of that, like when she ran for Congress when we were living in LA and while I was in film school and following her page, and she was like running for Congress, and when she lost, she went on a rampage against the Republicans. Like it was all their fault. They were a bunch of this, that, and the other thing. I'm like, well, you just shot all your teachings in the foot. You don't stand for any of your teachings, do you? But those people, like those that all is done. It's all done. And now, like we get the opportunity to I mean, if we do it, I think what runs through me is that it's also the true mystics, the real true mystics, just laugh at everything.
Yeah.
And when we get to the point as a collective where we're just laughing at ourselves,
Mhm.
we suddenly have nothing. We have no oppositional forces within us. Then there's nothing to create resistance against, and so then we can just flow. We can just really like be what we're naturally supposed to be, which is just very free flowing energy beings in a human body, and creating from there.
Yeah. And like you're saying, the true that's another word I can't say. Mysticism.
Mystics.
The true mystics don't. There's so many we don't know about, and we'll never know
Right.
about.
Right.
They don't feel the need to go external. They don't feel the need to convince other people. They're just themselves, and
they're not going, "Hey, follow me on Instagram."
not even online. They probably don't even have, like, I don't know, maybe it's a judgment again from myself.
I don't know. Yeah. But they're certainly not seeking external validation.
Exactly. And that is something that I know for myself I could definitely learn from, because like the whole like Facebook arrival in my life and Instagram and all that, like I had to shift my way of thinking about that, because it's that external validation, and I feel like in the community we have a lot of that. Like we have a lot of need to be like to have people say, "Oh, Isabel said this, it was wonderful, like Isabel enlightened me, Isabel gave me that insight." Like we seek that, or not necessarily seek it, but we value it a lot, or get really satisfied from it, which I don't think that it's about the external world. It's about what it means for you.
What you were just saying reminds me of two things. One, what we talked about Reiki and Usui last time.
Yeah.
Usui's teaching, had a phrase that said, walk, I'm going to paraphrase it, but walk lightly through praise and blame, meaning don't rely on, what happens is if you're always seeking praise and you get all joyful about praise, then you are probably going to be tanked by criticism. So you're still like, and they are the two sides of the exact same coin. So the middle road, as Buddha said, and even the Dalai Lama, a documentary we had to watch when I was in film school that was just released about the Dalai Lama, was just this documentarian was following him around and everything, got a lot of great footage with him. And at one point somebody said, "Well, what does it make you feel when people say how much they love you and everything?" He said, "It makes me feel nothing." And they said, "Well, like that makes no sense." And he said, "Well, I'm just happy, as happy as I can be, because I'm like anybody else, just a human trying to find his best happiness, But he said, like, and he's virtually said what Usui said, which is like, if people criticize me, okay. If people praise me, okay. It's all the same to me, and that is a blissful experience.
Yeah,
that is an ecstatic experience. What if we allowed ourselves to be happy when somebody criticized us, like joyful?
Yeah.
Then we'd be equally joyful when they praise us, because it would all be equal. It'd be like, thank you, just thank you, just thank you. Like that is not a utopian ideology. That is actually an evolution of ourselves that is like right at our fingertips right now.
That's so interesting. It makes me realize that for me, criticism, or when they call it constructive feedback, I struggle with that a lot. So you're making me realize that that's an aspect of me that I need to like bring light to, because it's definitely something that I struggle all the time with. Because
and for me,
like, who are you to give me constructive feedback? Like,
oh yeah, right. I know. I hear you. It's hard, right? It's hard because we want to know that what we do in our life is valid.
Right. Yeah.
But nobody's ever going to give us the validation for the things that we want to be validated for.
That is so true. Yeah.
Or for like these teachers that we're picking on, they're seeking so much external validation that they don't know what it's like to just be okay without receiving it.
Do you think that's well, maybe it would be generalized, but it's definitely one aspect of spiritual elite.
Elitism?
Yeah, to
Ah,
to to like to seek approval and to be like that one person that like said this thing or like be quoted basically.
uh-huh.
That's probably like one of their main deep down intention.
Hmm. Yeah. I mean, I just feel like it all comes down to all the things that we've talked about in our podcast thus far, which is just like if you can do the inner work, and really it shouldn't be that hard to do this inner work. It shouldn't be. I don't even know that we should call it inner work anymore. I feel even that's got to change
Yeah,
because that's still presuming that you've got marching orders ahead of you before you can be happy. You know,
just like the
um,
same thing we talked before, right? Like it doesn't have to be that.
doesn't have to be that. I would maybe I could answer what you're just talking about in my way, which is again like I'm outing myself again. Like yes, I have a wife and a twin flame, but I also have a partner now. And her whole role, she was in the Navy for 4 years, and then for the last 2 years has been in taking 20 units at a time in college and working a job
You mentioned,
about 15 to 20 hours a week.
yeah,
And basically 6 years straight of a solid structured life and still trying to show up for friends. Basically, her only play uh, was almost non-existent. And when I don't get to look in and see what her energy is, it's like really like the universe is like, nope, you're just going to have to be present and trust every step of the way.
interesting.
And I'm like, okay, all right, this is interesting, which has been a challenge. But along the path of allowing that, more and more her energy pops up to me just randomly. It'll pull me twice in the 8 weeks that we've been together. We I've been pulled into a spontaneous channeling state because of her energy. When I haven't intentionally gone into a channeled space now for about 5 months. And so twice she's pulled me in, and both times to give me a look around the energy field that she is and that she's here to bring.
Okay.
And then on top of that, then there's been other moments where like we'll talk and all this, and then we'll stop talking, like we'll hang up our call because she's also 3 hours time zone difference from me at this point, at this time. And like all of a sudden I'll like close my eyes and go into her energy field. Well, the most recent channeling lasted a good half hour, 45 minutes, I don't know. And while I was in it, it showed me her energy, and it looked like if you've seen the movie Matrix, when it has all the digits going up and down, streaming up and down. Well, it looks like that, except it's got colors moving. And it's almost like if you took a newspaper and took the colored pictures and put them through a shredder and you held all the shredding side by side, but they're moving like this. And then it showed me, when I saw that, then it showed me mine, and mine is the same exact colors, but mine is circular, operating with this. And it showed how we're going to merge those two together and through our journey together. And it's going to be something that the world has never actually seen before. But but it said that her only energy, and this ties back to our last episode where you were told in a session that you have no purpose on life. This ties, so for her, her only purpose on life is to play.
Okay.
Play. That's her only purpose. So the last 6 years, she's been doing nothing but work. And she's still trying to do it. And her parents and her family and her friends all have this concept of hold it together, girl. Like you can't deconstruct your life. You're supposed to be what we think you are.
Right.
Meanwhile, her energy field is like, no, that's not what you're supposed to do at all. You're supposed to play, only play. And I'm in this journey now where I'm only supposed to play. And that's it. I have no other task before me now. And this is all tying into spiritual elitism, because now I'm being criticized and she's being criticized by people who call themselves spiritual for deconstructing responsibility, when that is our calling, is to deconstruct personal responsibility and accountability, to know what's on the other side of that. Because nobody's ever really witnessed that sort of transition,
Right.
publicly.
Yeah.
Now, some people have gone through it to a degree, but it's hard to know. Like, I think the people who actually have gone all the way through that, we don't know who they are, but because they just reached it and then they're out and doing it. But we have a role of showing the world what that looks like. And so people are already criticizing us and saying, we're being young and immature and this and that and the other thing, and how dare us, and trying to hold us accountable to their standards, their ideology.
Right.
And so we are now faced with that judgment from them, which triggers our self-judgment. And it's like, can we do this? Can we do this? How are we going to do this? Like, what's it going to look like to completely deconstruct all personal responsibility and just be floating in the wind, And what does that look like? How far does it go? Well, we will only know by going on the journey together. But spiritual elitism is really, really prominent in that right now. Like, no, to be what you're supposed to be in the world, you should not be doing this and you should not be doing that.
That's so true. And it's funny because I had my own experience of spiritual elitism this week where
you got it. You said it.
Yes, I told you.
Before the end of the episode. Yeah.
Let's finish the podcast right here. No, I'm joking.
I know. That was it. That was the point, just so Isabel could say elitism.
But someone on the Heart Center group asked about our awakening journey.
Yeah.
And how it was to go through the awakening. And my response was like, I don't believe that the awakening is ever done. I think it's a full journey. Like I feel like we go through it our whole life. And then I kind of felt bad because I'm like, oh, I just like positioned myself that the awakening is a journey and not a one thing, but maybe someone think it's a one thing. Like, do you know what I mean? Like I felt like I was imposing my belief to someone who was like opening up to learn more about it. So I kind of felt bad as a teacher to say that. And I just felt like it just didn't feel right after a while. I was like, oh, maybe I shouldn't have said that. Like, it sounded really like this is what it is.
Well, what I feel from what you're saying is that you did the exact right thing and you're just second guessing yourself.
Yeah.
Based off it. Because that's what happens is we always second guess ourselves and we try and stay in a box then that everybody wants us to conform to, which is that I think the proper definition of spiritual elitism.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, exactly. But that was my experience. Like, it felt yucky. It felt like, that sounded like, again, like almost obnoxious, almost like,
interesting. I wasn't there, but I would say that you said the right thing because my shaman mentor in the Amazon, who's from here in North Carolina, said the same thing to me. When the last time I was there was almost 3 years ago, and the first time was 3 years before that, and this time he's like, you keep talking about your awakening 3 years ago. Like, one, you're stuck in time. Are you going to come out of that loop so you can move forward? And two, the awakening doesn't end. Yeah. He's like, it's a perpetual journey. And he needed to say it to me the way that he did so I would break the loop, the pattern that was in my head. And that's why I'm saying you did the right thing. Yeah. You helped a person not construct, at least give them the opportunity to not construct a mental loop to be in. So you did the right thing.
Yeah. And Chris actually said something, who's the founder of the Heart Center. He said that, what did he say? I thought, this is it. That's what I was trying to express, is like, you're never always in a state of awakening. And if you are, you're basically ending existence on Earth. And
exactly. Chris and I have had that conversation as well, and we recognize that as truth, and a lot of people do. So I think, Isabel, you did I think you're presenting an example of what I'm talking about. Like, this is the kind of the mental trap of the journey, is to say, oh, I stepped outside the box that I was, and now I brought something through in a way that was inappropriate, and but that's not true. And that's the thing, is like Ram Dass said something that I find mentally obtuse, but man, he activated me, so he did his job.
True. Yeah, when you see, yeah, when I see, yeah, exactly. That's true.
My first big aha moments of deconstructing my mind were George Carlin a year before he died, and I never liked George Carlin. But I was watching his It's Bad For You tour on HBO, and I was like, oh my God, he's like saying all the things that I know. It's like my whole system was being activated left and right.
Cool.
And then he died a year later, and and I've spent a lot of time talking like George Carlin, and I think I'm going back to speaking like George Carlin again. The difference is, I can't speak for George. I think the difference is that I'm not actually attached to the outcome. I think George Carlin was attached to the outcome. He was really trying to get people to wake up.
Yeah.
You know, I'm not attached to getting people to wake up anymore, which gives me the liberation to be able to play and be just gliding through. And so when we talk about the things that you just, like your example and all of this, there's a lot at play.
Mm-hmm.
And play, I think it all comes down to play. The more we allow ourselves to be playful and joyful, the more the answers just come.
Right. And for me, play is discovery, right? Like it's exploring and it all lines up. It is absolutely that. Like you're exploring the different perspective, the different belief, the different values, like what's going on. And I love it. And while you were talking, like it made me think of another thing that I noticed in spiritual elitism. I'm going to say it super fast.
Actually, the way you're saying it, I think is fine. Because why do we have to call it elitism? You know, like the way you're saying it, I think is perfect.
And like, I heard something. It was again on the Book of Mastery I'm listening to, which I love. It's really making me think. And he says something that, you know, Hitler or think of any villain in our history was still a divine being.
That's right.
And for so many people who are spiritual, this is so hard to comprehend.
Exactly.
To think that he was the devil or he was a reincarnation of like darkness. You had light. And when they said that, I was like, oh, it felt weird. But then I started thinking about it, and I'm like, yeah, he maybe just lost his way. Maybe he just went too much into the ego, or maybe he was there to enlighten us. Maybe he was there to like trigger something. Do you know what I mean? Like, start exploring that whole aspect, and instead of being like, no, let's not think of him, and this is like taboo, and we can't.
Right. So Hitler was a trained mystic, and if you're stuck in the mental realm, you'll say Hitler went mystic and then went wrong with it.
Okay.
So that's the story of the mental realm.
Okay.
Allison actually channeled about him when we lived in LA in 2015.
Yeah.
And asked about him, and she was definitely deep in channeling and was getting incredible guided information. And so she was in a place where the mind was no longer attached, and because Allison's also very sensitive about killing and didn't like the answer through her mind that came. But the answer that came was Hitler wanted to know, his life experience was to want to know what it was like to be loved by millions, to be revered or seen by millions. Maybe not loved by millions, but I can't remember how it was, but basically seen by millions. And all the people who suffered under him had the life purpose of giving one person that experience.
Wow. Yeah.
That's the divine answer, and you can't take that away, because that is the truth. That is the full truth. And further, his role on Earth, because of that, started to awaken the planet to how strong atrocities can be if we don't start to switch gears in our planet.
Exactly. And that's what I mean by like,
that was a mastery role. That's a very non-self-serving role to come down and show the world through those means how we've got to switch gears.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Switch perspectives, switch, yeah, totally. Absolutely. Yeah. It is. And that's the piece to it is one person kind of woke up so many other people.
Yeah, right.
Like,
I
like you.
what I'm saying right now would actually just probably tie me back into what Ram Dass might have been trying to say, that full enlightenment of that caliber to understand the cosmic play is a rare thing. Because right now, people think they've got enlightenment and can't see that answer and don't want to see that answer. I agree with that aspect of what Ram Dass was saying when he said that only a certain amount of people will reach enlightenment. That kind of enlightenment is still right now pretty rare. But I'm finding all sorts of people in their 20s right now that already know that kind of stuff. It's just like as if they learned it in grade school growing, and it was their truth all along.
So,
but nobody's taught them that. They just carry it. They know that.
It's unreal the amount of people that are in touch with that. Like for me, talk to me when I was 25 and I had no clue about that aspect of life. No clue. Like
me either.
So even when I was in my early 30s, I had no clue.
Yeah. And it's always unfolding, right? It's all the awakening journey really does not end. You're 100% correct on that. If it ends, it's because you're no longer in the body, or there is no or, because even when the planet reaches this higher evolutionary state, there's still going to be more. There's always more, because the nature of the true universe is infinite. It's infinite. There's always more. It's never ending.
It's so exciting. I think this is so exciting. Think about like how, I don't know. I am not someone who's usually in the future, but to think like how it's going to look in 20 years, 10 years from now, even.
I know.
What's going to, I find that really exciting.
Yeah.
And I like to think that spiritual elitism will be like almost like from the past, in the sense that we will no longer need we no longer need a specific guru for understanding our physical self, right? Most people are pretty much in control of their body, like in the sense like we go to the doctor now and tell the doctor what's wrong with us. Like, do you know what I mean? Maybe we'll be there with the spiritual aspect of us.
Right. And we're all actually moving towards that. So all these things that we're picking on and calling out, it's all helping us actually move towards that. So that's the cosmic enlightenment right there. It's all still guiding us that direction. And why these things that are happening, even if they're traumatizing or abrupt or obtuse from the mind, like they're still guiding us that direction.
What a great subject to reflect on. Like, I'm curious to hear from listeners. Like, what do you like, what do you think? Are we like, you see us as spiritual elite? Like, is that like, like, I don't know.
Totally. Yeah, I love hearing it. I like being called out. It tickles me. It makes me laugh so hard. And I will say that my 20 years in the Navy helped that, because you have to have thick skin to be in the military even for a year. And I did 20. And the Navy is the pirate branch. Any other branches will tell you, like, we're kind of marauders, you know? So it's like, I did 20 years in a branch where all we do is bust each other's balls, you know? So, I always welcome it. Like, and if I get triggered, well, then I'm going to learn something from it.
Thank you. Well, this is a great episode, and I want to go shoot guns. So
go play with guns, Isabel. Have a happy 4th of July.
Thank you. You too. To everyone too. So
everybody, yeah, exactly. Even if you're not listening to this on the 4th of July, have a happy day, whatever it is.
Yeah. Celebrate the independence. It was a very important moment.
Exactly.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks, Isabel, and thanks, listeners.
Yes. Have a good rest of day or evening or night, whatever time you're listening to us.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay. Bye.